Hello, I've got here the 1933 Bespoke Wildsmith shoe, which was in the previous episodes. It's been stretched quite a lot, at least a size, maybe a size and a half. It was also been it's been stripped and sanded, and a few little bits of stitching repair have been done to this shoe. All of the stretching and the stripping and the re-dyeing is in the previous episodes. At this stage, the shoe has had at least 3 or 4 weeks since the last recording of purely moisturising the skins. All of the inside, because it was quite dry. It's been moisturised with a coloured cream inside. The soles have been moisturised intensively, and obviously the outer skins. And this is done most days for several weeks, so probably as much as a month. So I've just kept applying and applying and applying inside, the bottom, and the soles. I've just kept applying the cream. Nothing's been touched on this shoe now for about a week, so it's actually quite dry to touch. And all I'm going to do, let me just take a soft cloth. Now this is moisturiser only; it's not polish. We're going to come to polish in a few minutes. I'm just going to buff the shoe very, very carefully, and we'll get quite a nice shine, almost a polished shine, but it isn't polish. The shoe was very, very carefully sanded a few weeks ago. I did record the process, so if you've not already seen the film, have a look at that one. We had a lot of cracks and chips, and it's a very old skin, and with flexing and it gets dry, the skin starts to degrade and it cracks. So I've reduced the cracking, and in fact I've almost eliminated it entirely, just with the sanding, very, very fine sanding. Very, very similar to how you might, if you've got dry skin on your feet, you use a pumice stone. No amount of moisturising is going to revive dead, cracked, dry skin on our heels. So we file it off and then moisturise the skin. And it's a very similar situation with shoes and leather skins. As I say to you, that's what I've done. I've sanded the skin, I've re-dyed it, and I've moisturised it intensively. We've got a beautiful shine starting to appear, and this hasn't got any polish on it yet. I just want to give the skin a good buff with a very, very soft cloth, very dry, and spend a minute or two buffing this before I apply any polish. What we want to try and do is get an ultra military type gloss on the toes here, like a mirror shine. It's not achievable on the rest of the shoe. You can do it on the heels, and you can do it around the toes, anywhere where the shoe doesn't flex. When we walk, obviously a shoe bends. It bends here, it flexes. The toe doesn't flex. If you build the polish very thick to get that ultra sheen, the military type shine, it simply cracks here. You can only get away with perhaps 2 or 3 fine coats in the vamp area, anywhere where the shoe bends. The toes don't bend, so you can put as many coats as you like. You can really build it up and around the heel, and that's what we're going to be doing with this shoe. But first of all, I just want to give it a light buff with a dry cloth, just to take the matte finish off the moisturising cream. I use Sophia. It's a French. It's a beautiful cream. I use Sophia. It's my favourite. It's a little pricier than many creams, but it is rather good. There are dozens out there, and they all do a good job really on dry skin. Any moisturiser is better than no moisturiser. So if a skin's extremely dry, and it's not, I don't know, something that's 50, 100 years old and been neglected for years, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't, in the first instance, I wouldn't waste a lot of very expensive cream on that skin. I'd use a much more intense cream, the type of perhaps something like upholstery cream. It comes in huge pots. It's quite greasy. Doesn't give a brilliant final finish. It leaves it a little bit on the greasy side, but it is wonderful for reviving, in the first instance, extremely dry skins. These weren't too bad. They didn't need that, but exotic skins like alligator, crocodile, that really dries out horrendously. And if you've got a big case, you're one of the small pots of shoe cream, you may be paying £6 or £7 for a little pot. It's not going to go very far on an alligator skin suitcase, let's say. One I'm very, very fond of, and it's something I've used for about 30 years on my vintage Jaguar, the upholstery on my vintage Jaguars, is it's made by Connolly Brothers, who incidentally they're the tanners that do the upholstery for Aston Martin, Jaguar, Rolls-Royce. They have done for years, and I believe they also do the those gorgeous green seats in the Houses of Parliament. I believe that skin is by Connolly also, but they do a very nice cream. It's called Connolly Hide Care. It used to be years ago called Connolly Hide Food. And that's a good cream, very good. You know, it's only, you get quite a, I don't know, 300-400 millilitres in a pot, and yeah, it's got a lid. It's quite thick. You have to scoop it out. It doesn't pour, and you know, you'll pay 12 or 15 pounds, something like that, for quite a big pot. Now that goes a long way on a very, very dry skin. The small pots of ultrafine cream don't go very far on a very, very dry skin. What I would do is use the thicker, cheaper cream to begin with, and then as the skin starts to revive, it does leave a film, like a greasy surface. So I'd use like a solvent. I use methylated spirit just on a bit of cotton wool, just a very, very quiet lick over the skin, just to take off the tacky surface. And then I would use the more expensive cream as a finishing cream. And it's that expensive cream that I'm just buffing here. Now then, they've got a beautiful shine, actually, really beautiful, but that's got no polish on it. But that's purely the Sophia cream I've used here. They didn't need the more intensive, cheaper cream, to be honest with you. I say it's cheaper. It's not a cheap product. It just comes in a big pot. It's more economic to buy it in a big pot, and than these tiny little pots. You probably on a crocodile bag, you might get through 4 or 5, maybe more, pots of the small expensive cream. But in my next series, I'm going to be doing a lot on alligator, crocodile and exotic skins. I do get asked an awful lot how to care for it, how to maintain it, and how to restore it, and also genuine skins. There's a lot out there that's fake, and how to identify a genuine from a fake skin. So I'm just chattering away here, trying to lose a bit of time as I just buff this skin. That's all I'm doing. I'm not polishing it, I'm just buffing it, and I'm just trying to get the best sheen possible before I apply any polish whatsoever. The less work the polish has to do, the better. So this actually looks beautiful. That's got no polish on it whatsoever, and that could be worn as a dress shoe even without the polish. It's that fine. But oops, let me just get my I've got a very hard wax polish here and some water. You need to mix the polish with water as you're applying it. I'll show you that. This cloth's quite soft. This one's very soft. Yeah, they're both very soft. In fact, that one's softer. I'm going to use that for the final buff. That one, it looks a bit stained. It's been through the washing machine many times, boil washed, tumble dried. So, and I'm just going to pop on a pair of polythene gloves. The wax polish is not harmful on the skin. I just don't want black hands for the next. It goes into the grain of the skin, under your nails. These are just cheap disposable polythene gloves, purely to protect my skin from the staining. Now, yeah, I'm very pleased with that. Bear in mind, this shoe's been stretched. It's been stretched quite dramatically, a good 8 to 10 millimeters in length. I don't know, about 5 or 6 millimeters in the width, and it's even got a little bit of height. I'm not sure exactly, but it's definitely slightly higher than it was, maybe only 3 or 4 millimeters. But I've worked very, very hard to keep the original shape. Now this shoe has not been touched. This one's smaller. I can't get my foot on that one. I can wear this one quite comfortably, but the actual maker shapes are pretty much identical. The shoe that's been stretched hasn't lost its beautiful sort of contouring and its sort of chiseled toe. That's all still there. Now, if you don't stretch with enough care, and this is all explained in the previous films, you will lose the maker's shapes. It becomes baggy here, you lose the fantastic shape of the toes. And this is a bespoke shoe. It was extremely refined, and ready-to-wear shoes don't come in these beautiful sort of shapes, extreme tight contouring into the ball of the foot, and they just tend to be a bit floppier, particularly around the vamp. They're larger, they're designed to go on anybody's foot, quite frankly. They're not supposed to be a one-off fit. This shoe was made for one person, and it is very difficult for anybody else to get their foot in that, and I'm having to modify it to fit me. We will treat this shoe separately. I won't do that on camera. It needs a lot of work. It's already been stripped. It hasn't been stretched. It hasn't been sanded. You can still see the surface cracking. So all of that will have to come. It will get dyed, it will get moisturized, and it will be treated exactly the same as this one, but I'll do that off camera. You don't need to see it twice. Now, let's get my, this is the slightly coarser of the two cloths. The base is the same. This one's just been washed more. So I'll keep that for the final polishing. So let's get a little polish. It's very hard, this wax. You have to sort of work it out. It doesn't scoop out. You have to really get a bit of friction on there. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put on a tiny bit on the skin, direct to the skin without water, and just the very, very fine film all over without water. And I'll have to start applying water for the second and third coats. So let's just give that a very, very light rub all into the edge of the welting here. And it's quite a hard polish, so it doesn't apply easily, but it gives the most magnificent shine. Let's get a little bit into the tongue. The tongue was repaired. This was done off camera. The lining at the back of the tongue had sort of decayed, so I've managed to let a new bit of skin in all behind, and all of this stitching along the edge here, that's all been done by hand, as is the stitching around the edges here, where I'm just giving a very fine lick of polish. You know, the edges just here had started to split. The stitching had decayed, and it was starting to fail. It put enormous tension on the skin, and when they'd been worn previously, the skin had just started to split. So what I did, I separated the outer skin from the inner skin, the lining, and I've inserted very, very carefully a very thin piece of chamois skin, chamois leather, and the type of thing you would use for, you know, wiping down a car after it's been washed. And I've inserted that and glued it to the outer skin only, not the lining, and then re-stitched very, very delicately by hand through the original holes. So the chamois was sandwiched. It's a repair I will show you in great detail in a separate episode later on this channel. But this one was purely about the stretch, so I didn't want to delay the stretching filming by going through all of the stitching. But we'll come back to that. But you end up with the sandwich piece. It's poking out, you know, between the two. You stitch it and then trim it off afterwards, but it cannot be seen. And any tension is sort of supported by that sandwiched chamois. Now, we've got a very fine coat. Just keep the same part of it's important to keep it flat. And so I'm going for a bit more polish, and then this time I'm going to dip it in water, just a tiny bit. You know, there is water in this lid, and it helps with the friction. It just helps to spread the polish. Now I'm now going to give a much faster, heavier coat. It's wet. The polish is wet. I need a bit more water. There we go. So I only really want, in this vamp area, this is the area that bends and flexes, more polish, more water. I only really want a maximum of 2 coats in this area. Let's just work up into the tongue. That's the area that bends, and it will simply crack. If you try to do a mirror finish further back in the toes, as you walk, it will crack. You get the most ghastly, it's kind of flaky, it doesn't look nice. You can only realistically put a higher build on this toe area that I'm doing just now. Doesn't matter how many coats you do, 3, 5, 10, 20, it doesn't flex. And the more coats you apply in a smooth manner, the more intense and glossy the shine. But as I say, unfortunately, you can't do it any further back. This area now, this bends, so you can only get 1 or 2 coats there, and this area around the laces tends to flex quite a bit. So once again, 1 or 2 coats there only, a bit more polish with a touch of water. There we go. So working in circular motions all the time, quite quickly, a bit more polish, a bit more water. Now, around this back area, around the heel, you can build up plenty there. That doesn't flex, so we can get a beautiful gloss. Obviously it's hidden by the trousers largely, and down onto the heel. But it's still nice to have, even in the discreet areas that are hidden, still nice to have a beautiful, beautiful gloss sheen. So I'll go over these several times. This is an ultra high build, high gloss polish. It's very hard, so you don't need as many coats as you might with a softer polish. You know, the softer ones, they go onto the cloth easier, they apply easier, but they're harder work to build. This is once again, it's made by Sophia. It's they make gorgeous polishers and very high quality. They're slightly priced than a lot you'll buy, but I think they're worth the extra money. There we go, just working in circular motions. It's getting quite a thick build, even though I've only applied 2 or 3 coats. This polish does build very quickly. So it's a repetitive process, but this is all that there is to it. You just have to keep it wet. It starts to, as you can feel it start to drag. You get a feel for this as you go on, and let's just get a bit of water only on the skin. There we go, just off the tip of my finger. Yeah, you get a feel for this. The more you practice, you can feel it start to drag as your finger just doesn't move as quickly or as smoothly. So you know you need just a touch more polish or a touch more water. It takes practice. It's like, there we go, that's lovely and smooth now. So yeah, it's actually quite physical work. Just moving in circular motions. So there we go, that's it. Just very, very lightly skip over the areas that bend. I don't want to get too much of a build there. Very, very light skip over. There is polish, but we don't want it thick. It will simply crack the first time it's worn. And I can apply much heavier around these areas that I've already explained. They don't flex, so it won't crack. And into the heel, into the welt. Now, yeah, and that's literally all there is to it. Just to keep applying and keep applying and keep applying, keep rubbing. And I generally let these, you can just keep rubbing until you can feel it dry. Some people show you just to keep rubbing with different parts of the cloth, even after you've stopped applying the polish. This is another application. And they keep rubbing and they kind of rub it dry. That's absolutely fine. It works. It actually takes a little more skill, if I'm honest with you. You know, it's to those of you that are not used to polishing and haven't built up your skills, and it's like anything. You just get a feel for it. You get a feel for when it's dry. And what I'd recommend is stopping. Just put it on, leave it slightly murky like this, and maybe leave it for 20 minutes. Half an hour, then come back with the dry part, not the wet part of the cloth, and then buff it dry when it's dried naturally, rather than continuing to polish and forcing it to dry. It's a much more advanced skill. Professional polishers will do it that way, but it is more difficult. If you press on too much, you can almost dislodge the surface. The friction of you rubbing it will sort of melt the surface and put creases and wrinkles in, and then you've got to go back to the polish and melt those away. So I'm getting close to, let's have a look, just we'll put a couple more coats on. Then I'm going to turn off the camera. I'm going to leave the shoe for half an hour or so, and we'll come back to it when it's dried naturally and hardened, and then I'll just put the buffing on. It's an easy way, so I'll show you the easier way than the way maybe, as I say, to a professional wouldn't stop. They'd keep rubbing and and they would do it in one hit, let's say, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to stop. That's it. Tiny bit more polish. Doesn't matter how many applications you put on these toes. It's 10, 20 applications is not unusual for somebody that wants that glorious mirror sheen. Here in the toes only. Once again, I can't stress enough, don't try to put that much polish in the vamp area. Anywhere where the shoe bends when you're walking, it will simply crack. Okay, one more One more, that's it, tiny bit of water, here we go. And then I'm just going to turn off the camera and let it dry for half an hour, and we'll come back to it when it's had the time to dry. There we go, that's it. Just, yeah, here we go. So I can feel it starting to dry under the cloth. So somebody more courageous, somebody more professional would continue rubbing. I'm going to stop and show you an easier way. Just let a little bit of time take place, and a little bit of natural sort of hardening of the polish. So that's not finished yet. We'll come back in a few minutes, let it dry, and then I'll take the softer, cleaner cloth and I'm going to buff that entirely dry. No more polish, no more water. I just want to let the polish harden off naturally. There are certain solvents within the wax, and they will evaporate. I could keep running whilst they evaporate, but there is a chance of upsetting the surface. Let's say if I press just a little bit too hard, it will start to drag and it'll get folds and creases. Then you're almost back to square one. More water, more wax, more polish, and I'll have to work them away. I'm very happy with the surface. I just want it to dry naturally. So we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, the shoe and the polish, it's had off camera, I turned the camera off, it's had about 30 minutes to dry. You watched me apply the various layers of polish. Now let me just get some of this out of the way. That's the water, the polish, I don't want to knock that over. I'm going to put my gloves back on. I just wanted to allow the polish to harden naturally. So we've done that off camera. I'm now just going to take the softer, which one? Yes, this is the cloth I use to apply, and it's slightly wet. Make sure we get it out of the way. This one's a bit more worn, a bit more used. It's actually starting to rot. It's extremely soft. It's an old bed sheet. It's many years old, very fine cotton. But when they're new, it's too coarse actually. Any fine weave, it actually, as you buff the mirror shine, it leaves tiny minute scratches. So when the bed sheet, becomes so worn it can no longer be used. If I pick this up, you see it's got sort of holes in it. It had just rotted through use. It was no longer fit for purpose, so that way you sort of tear it up, boil wash them, tumble dry them, and don't use fabric softener. Fabric softener leaves it's like a synthetic film on the cloth, and that will it will appear in the surface of your polish. So these are sort of boil wash, very fine, and this is from the same sheet. It's just not been washed as many times. It actually looks a bit cleaner, apart from the polish in the middle, which we applied a few minutes ago. So this one, even though it's slightly stained, this is from it's been through the wash from previous polishers. Those stains are quite dry. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just literally going to apply no more polish to this shoe. All I want to do is buff it. So we just try and get the cloth quite flat. And I'm literally going to buff and buff in circular motions. It's completely dry. The solvents have evaporated, and all I want to do is now get my mirror polish. So working in circular motions only. I'm using quite a flat part. I'm using about 3 or 4 fingers, as flat as possible. Spread the load if you like. If I do it with one finger, there's a possibility of pressing on so hard the friction will melt the surface that's completely dry and put like a wrinkly spot in there. So I'm doing it with a pad, all the cloths folded in. Try to do it without wrinkles, and just keep a very flat. Spread the load if you like, and this will take maybe 5 or 10 minutes. All I'm doing now is just putting a gloss sheen to the layers of polish. There's not much polish through here. There's an awful lot on the toes. That will take a little bit more effort. So I'm very pleased with the outcome. Actually, it's beautiful. It should definitely be worth the effort, and I do hope you found this series interesting and useful. Shows you what can be achieved with a stretch. You don't done with patience and care. You don't necessarily destroy the shoes, but obviously done in a rough manner, they will be totally destroyed. I do an awful lot of sort of stills on Instagram, Bespoke Addict on Instagram. It sort of shows just a still of the processes, and people ask, "Wow, what are you doing? And how do I do this? How do I do that?" You know, it doesn't really give much of a sense of what's involved, just showing stills. That's why these films that I'm doing here on YouTube are so much more useful. And I do get people try to copy what I'm doing, and then they'll probably get lost halfway through. If they've not, you watch the films like this, you get a lot more instruction. I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody copying what I'm doing just from seeing a few stills on Instagram. There's simply not enough information on there. But gosh, this is coming up beautifully, beautifully shiny. Very, very, very pleased. Absolutely thrilled with the result. So yeah, just as I'm polishing away, let's just go over what's been done. This shoe's been stripped with a solvent. In this instance, I used methylated spirit on cotton wool to remove the original polish. The shoe was stretched using a solvent stretching agent. That basically softens the skin. It sinks into the skin, it softens the skin. These are all done in previous episodes in this series. So, you know, there's a lot of detail if you go through the films. So the softening agent, the stretching agent softens the skins, allows it to give. Without the softening agent, the skins would burst, they would tear, they would rupture. It would be total destruction. There'd be no coming back from that. There's a certain amount of risk around the stitching. The stretching has to be done slowly. You can't just go 10 millimeters in one go. You can do a couple of millimeters in one go, and then you stop, and then possibly even apply some moisturizer to the skins once it's dried overnight, and then you go through the stretching process again. You can't really do a big stretch in one go. It's too risky. You will cause damage to the skin. You'll cause damage to the stitching. The skins will rupture, they'll tear. Just a slow process. Eventually it gives. Just keep it under tension, and you know, it just gives a little bit. Once it's dried, it's set in that new position. Then you take out the stretcher, apply more softening agent, and then reapply tension. Try and get another millimetre or two. Excuse me. So we're very, very close to being finished now. I could probably rub this for half an hour or so, just increasing the intensity of the shine. Obviously on camera I'm not going to do that. I just want to try and achieve this in 5 or 10 minutes. There's nothing more tedious than watching somebody repeating a process. So, but we're very, very close now. Yes, but do see the earlier films where if you've not already seen them, in fact, you know, that is, do see the earlier films where the skins are prepared for the stretch. And the preparation is absolutely key, as is the technique itself, and seeing how unloved and sad the skins looked once they've been stripped and stretched, and they did look ever so sad, all flat and matte, and they looked ever so uncared for. At that stage it's easy to panic and think, why, dear me, I've ruined these skins. But obviously if you look at what we're achieving here, this is absolutely glorious. The sheen is very, very beautiful, and the surface of the skin is close to perfect. It actually looks new. This shoe was made in 1933. It was bespoke made for, I'd love to know who it was made for, I don't know, but I do know the maker, Wildsmith of London. They were very, very well known as military supplier, military maker. You know, sort of captains and sergeant majors and generals, they generally went to Wildsmith for their shoes. So the likelihood is it was a high-ranking military officer that commissioned these shoes in the first place. Wow, goodness me. Yeah, they are stunning. Absolutely thrilled. I'll probably continue to buff these over a period of a day or two, if I'm honest with you. You know, do 10 or 15 minutes here, leave it alone, come back, do another 10 or 15 minutes, because the more of this dry buffing you do, the more intense and smooth and perfect the sheen. But there's only so much we can do on camera. But if you're going to be stretching your shoes, please, I must stress enough, do go through the films. Be patient. Stretching is not to be rushed. You will destroy the skins, you'll destroy the shape, you'll destroy the stitching. It has to be done very, very patiently. Had a horrifying, well, it wasn't my shoe, but I was very horrified. I saw a pair of shoes for sale in the US, a pair of beautiful Foster and Son. And I've actually got a couple of pairs very similar, one in black, one in brown, and these were like a tan, very similar to the shape I'd already got, but they were too small. And to be honest, I really did fancy them, but they were slightly priced. If I'm honest, they were a little bit without my price range, and I didn't bid for them. Much though I like them, I didn't bid for them. And somebody that follows my Bespoke Addict YouTube channel bought them, and they were too small for him, and he stretched them. And he stretched them very quickly without being patient. And the glorious sort of shape, and they were just stretched horribly. They completely lost the identifiable sort of maker's signature, if you like. And that hasn't happened in this instance. This has still got the Wildsmith shaping. You can't tell this has been stretched. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed to sort of see those shoes bought by somebody else. They weren't my shoes. I didn't bid for them, and but I did get to see somebody else that I knew buy them, and quite honestly, he rushed the stretch. He should have taken about a month. I think looking at the result, I think he did it in about half an hour. He just rammed and crammed his way through it, made a real mess. I personally, I think the shoes are ruined. It very much looked, from what I could see on the camera, that the skins had ruptured. But they'd certainly lost all of the shape, and if it was done in a much slower manner, he would have got away with it. You know, many stretches. I would say the amount he needs to do, the process would need to be repeated at least 10, maybe 15 times. Just doing a millimetre or two at a time, allow it to settle, concentrate on the shape, and then maybe modify the stretching tool or the last that you're ramming inside there. But yeah, he just got carried away, I think, and did it in one go. So please, if you're going to do this, be patient. And I will say, if you're not patient, don't attempt it. It will fail. It will make a real mess. So I'm going to stop rubbing here, and let's get that cloth out of the way. I have to say I'm extremely thrilled with the outcome. There's no evidence of any stretch. There's no rupturing. There's no damage to the stitching. We haven't lost any of the original shape. Coming around the rear as well. We have a beautiful sort of mirror finish. And this could be built up more. You know, I've probably applied about, well, you watched me do it earlier, about 10 coats here and only a couple there. And once again around the back about 8 or 10, and they've all been blended together beautifully. I just need to apply the laces, and I always use 3mm to be precise, 3mm flat wax laces. I love flat laces, and the thinner the better. So I do have some brand new laces to go in this shoe. But we're going to stop here. I'm very pleased with the outcome of this shoe. If you are looking to stretch, please see the early episodes and study them, and please don't rush. It's a slow process. If you do it slowly with care, you'll get a result like this, where nobody would know that this had been quite dramatically stretched. It's at least 8 or 10mm longer than the original. I can get my foot in that very comfortably. The other shoe, which has been treated, I can barely get my foot in. It wrinkles my toes. You certainly can't walk in it. That one will get done. So I do hope you've enjoyed this series and found it useful and interesting. I'm Lee Morrison. This is Bespoke Addict YouTube channel.